Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. A manhunt is underway by the St. Catherine North Police for gunmen they believe have been abducting and robbing persons in the division. The men struck on Tuesday when they abducted a 47-year-old woman and her two adult daughters in the Hampton Green community. It happened about 10 p.m. when the woman and her daughters were walking home from church when a car drove up with men aboard. Now the men pulled guns and forced the women into the vehicle. The victims were taken to bushes in the Walks Road area where they were robbed and the two girls sexually assaulted. They were later released. The police theorized that the same group of men recently carried out similar attacks in the division. Meanwhile, residents of Norwich District in Portland last night staged a protest demanding justice for the killing of Kerry-Ann Hunter, the woman whose body was found in Cambridge over the weekend. They are accusing the police of moving too slowly in making an arrest for the killing. Sandy Williams reports.
30-year-old Kerry-Ann Hunter of Norwich District in Portland was found dead in Cambridge last Saturday. Her body was found in bushes along the Liddarth Main Road. 5 days later, family and friends of Kerry-Ann are still seeking answers. It's the reason they staged a protest last night, blocking the Norwich Main Road with debris, old equipment and vehicle parts.
From that time until now, we don't hear nothing what is going on with that case. And we want justice for her. And we're not going to stop blocking the road until we get justice. Because this is too much. Every time a woman is murdered in Portland, there is no resolving the case. Nothing. And this is too much. We need justice for Kerry-Ann's life.
Andrea Terrelong, a cousin of the deceased, says Kerry-Ann was last seen at her gate where she was picked up by a man. The residents believe the police are slow in taking action.
No, we're not even see police coming here so come protect we. We don't see nobody come protect we. The kids them is in a disarray. The kids them, we don't see no counselor. We promise them to come counsel we. Nobody can sleep. So nobody can, everybody afraid.
We are she now.
Everybody afraid. We can't sleep. We need justice, man. We can't sleep. We're afraid. We can't sleep. We're traumatized.
Yes.
And we not eat neither. So by the time they get the detention, we are dead. We want justice.
The roadblock was removed this morning by the police. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
To news in coronavirus, now a public health expert is insisting that the government should be firm on its stance to make it mandatory for visitors, all visitors, including Jamaicans overseas, to provide a negative COVID-19 test result before returning to the island. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says there was pushback from members of the diaspora to the suggestion. Head of the School of Public Health at UTech, Professor Winston Davidson, says the government should not relent. He says the measure is the first line of defense against the pandemic.
The fact is that the threat to Jamaica, as far as this pandemic is concerned, is related in large measure to those people coming from abroad. We know this. And so therefore, this must be our very first line of defense against this pandemic, especially for those Jamaicans, whether they are Jamaicans or not. It has nothing to do with whether you're Jamaican or you're non-Jamaican. The virus doesn't make that distinction. If the virus doesn't make that distinction, what are you doing making such a distinction?
The isolation ward at the Mandeville Regional Hospital has now exceeded its capacity. Health officials are now in the process of trying to convert another ward to facilitate COVID-19 patients. Shamila Pullen has this update.
The health services in Manchester is now in crisis mode as COVID-19 cases continue to escalate. The parish has so far recorded 1,279 COVID-19 cases. 40 of those persons have died.
The number of deaths for the parish of Manchester to date is 40. 40. 7 of those deaths occurred within the last week and a half. to 2 weeks. The number of persons on our active list, this number represents those persons who have been recently diagnosed and have not yet completed their quarantine isolation period. That number now stands at 402.
The impact from the cases continues to affect the Mandeville Regional Hospital. Acting Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Shanette Blair Walters, says the isolation ward at the hospital has exceeded its capacity.
We have now exceeded our capacity on the isolation ward. And as mentioned earlier, another ward is being retrofitted to accept additional cases, those who need hospital care. But we do have cases that are found on the other wards. And we are trying to manage those as best as possible to reduce spread to other individuals.
Dr. Blair Walters says a similar situation is happening at the Percy Junior Hospital.
Not yet bursting at the seams, but of great concern. And although this is a meeting of the Manchester Municipal Corporation, other hospitals in the southern region are reporting similar situations. The Ministry of Health and Wellness is working seriously to try and alleviate the system.
Shamela Pullen, TVJ News.
Meanwhile, the spike in COVID-19 cases continue. This as Jamaica recorded 329 confirmed cases over the last 24 hours, increasing the country's case count to 18,237. Their ages range from 1 year to 103 years old. Kingston and St. Andrew recorded most of the cases with 105, followed by St. James with 60 and St. Catherine with 59. Meanwhile, COVID-19 has claimed yet another life, pushing the country's death toll to 363. The latest case is a 61-year-old man from Westmoreland. The Health Ministry says 198 patients remain hospitalized. 18 are critically ill. Data from the World Health Organization shows the number of new COVID-19 cases reported across the globe has declined for a fourth consecutive week. The number of COVID-19 deaths reported worldwide decreased for the second week running, with 88,000 new deaths reported last week, a 10% drop compared to the previous week. The WHO reports that more than 3.1 million new COVID-19 cases were reported around the world last week. Now, that was a 17% decline from the previous week and the lowest number of cases worldwide since the week of October 26. Further afield, there's encouraging news in the fight against the coronavirus in the Americas. Director of the Pan American Health Organization, Dr. Carissa Etienne, says recent data shows a decline in the spread of the disease in the region. But she warns COVID-related deaths continue to increase. Details in this report.
Yes, finally good news coming out of the Pan American Health Organization. The director of PAHO, Dr. Etienne, has highlighted that the number of new cases is reducing as a total trend across the whole of the Western Hemisphere. These, she says, may suggest that the bulk of the new cases, this dramatic spread in new coronavirus cases that took over not just Latin America but the whole of the Western Hemisphere in the weeks following the Christmas holiday season, this new spread, this second wave, is finally flattening. But just after delivering this much-awaited positive news, she had very stark warning for the future. Take a listen to what she said.
Now, this is cause for hope, but not yet for celebration. The number of COVID deaths continues to escalate across the Americas, a sign that many health systems remain overwhelmed, particularly in those places that carry a heavy burden of COVID-19 infections.
Among the hotspots that are particularly worrying for PAHO are the Central American region between Guatemala, Salvador and Honduras, and the tree border area between Peru, Colombia and Brazil at the heart of the Amazon rainforest. To finish up the briefing, PAHO could only stress the importance of vaccines, urging both governments and citizens all across the Western Hemisphere to vaccinate as much and as quickly as possible.
And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. The public defender is questioning suggested amendments to the Zone of Special Operations ZOSA legislation proposed by the police. In its submission to Parliament's Joint Select Committee on ZOSA in January, the JCF requested more powers through the Act. Javon Keys reports.
In January 2021, the Jamaica Constabulary Force JCF made 16 recommendations for amendments to the Zones of Special Operations ZOSA Act. The proposed changes include allowing the JCF or members of the Joint Security Force to detain persons up to 5 days, criminalizing the prevention or the attempt to prevent security forces from carrying out searches of persons and property without a warrant in a zone, and empowering security forces to seize tools of trade if it is likely to be used to commit any offense. Public Defender Arlene Harrison Henry says while her office has not seen the recommendations in detail, at a first glance, some of the suggestions are unnecessary.
We are not sure, Chairman, how it is the JCF can justify seeking this additional power to detain for up to 5 days, when in zones so far and states of emergency, almost 100% of persons detained are released the same day.
She suggests any recommendation regarding detention should wait until the Supreme Court hands down its ruling on the security force's power to detain in enhanced security measures. As for the recommendation to criminalize an attempt to block searches by security forces,
this is an unnecessary call for additional power and an imposition on our resources. Section 30 of the Jamaica Constabulary Force Act already vests the police with such powers.
A similar recommendation was also made for the JCF's request to criminalize breaches of the curfew order. Meanwhile, the public defender thinks the JCF's request to seize tools of trade is also unreasonable.
Such a power should never be granted. Just should never be granted. A man's tools have always been exempt from seizure, even in hire purchase situations, Chairman. But Section 14.4a of the Zone of Special Operation Act sufficiently addresses that issue.
Javon Keys, TVJ News.
Meanwhile, the opposition is again calling for more Zones of Special Operations ZOSAs to be declared. Opposition leader Mark Golding made the call in the House of Representatives recently, minutes before Parliament voted to extend the measure in 4 communities.
The use of the Zone of Special Operations legislation has been so limited over the 3+ years of its existence. So really, it's 4 quite small communities in the scheme of the areas in Jamaica where high levels of violent crime exist. So, for example, in the case of Denham Town, there are surrounding communities which are from time to time impacted by high levels of violent crime.
ZOSAs are in effect in August Town, Denham Town, Greenwich Town and Mount Salem. Mr. Golding argues that it is time to explore whether the ZOSAs can be used in more communities across the island to reduce crime.
One wonders really in terms of an overall crime fighting strategy for the country, whether we shouldn't be looking at the elements of the ZOSA legislation that, from a law enforcement point of view, have been helpful in reducing the levels of crime in those communities on a sustained basis and seeking to learn from those lessons and see to what extent we can apply them on a broader basis.
In the meantime, National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says the zones of special operations form part of the government's overall plan to secure Jamaica. He says he takes note of the call for an expansion of the measure to other communities.
In fairness, Madam Speaker, in implementing the legislation, we had to stick to a particular plan in the outset because we didn't want to dilute it to a point where it didn't work. I think now that we have seen it operate and we are going to the review of the legislation, we'll ensure that we adopt some of the best practices and look at how some of the features can be extended beyond the years we are. But we still, I think the community will still, the government's bodies will still have to look at how we can focus on a number of the communities.
A man was shot and killed and another injured following a drive-by shooting in Newland, Portmore, St. Catherine Wednesday night. According to residents, around 8:30 p.m., a barrage of shots were heard on Adventist Close. Counsel for the South Borough Division, Ainsley Parkins, gave this account of the incident.
A white car drove in Adventist Close and drove out and actually accosted two men and shouted out police, and one put up them and they start firing, killing one on the spot and one was hospitalized.
Mr. Parkins suspects it may be a reprisal
Last
shooting.
week, Saturday, which is the 6th, about 2:30 p.m., a man was actually, I would say, style and killed between Adventist Close and Portmore Avenue. And that man was from Old Harbour Bay. And I think this is a reprisal for that killing.
The deceased has been identified as Stanford Betty, an employee of the Portmore Municipal Corporation. The injured man is in hospital in stable condition. To news in the region, Bermuda has administered over 9,000 vaccinations for the period through to February 6, 2021. During a media briefing recently, Bermuda's Health Minister Kim Wilson gave a breakdown of the figures.
A total of 3,999 or 44% males and 5,105 or 56% females, with 2,048 or 22% being persons under the age of 50, 2,257 or 25% being persons between the age of 50 and 64, 3,284 or 36% between the ages of 65 and 79, and 1,506 or 17% of persons who are over the age of 80.
She is, however, encouraging more men to be vaccinated.
And to register to be vaccinated. As you can see from the charts, only 44% of those persons that have been vaccinated thus far are male. And according to a recent paper published by researchers at Yale University, men are around 1.7 times more likely than women to die from COVID-19. And additionally, men older than 30 have a significantly greater mortality risk.
The health minister also addressed concerns about the side effects of the vaccine.
While no major safety concerns have been reported, you may experience some side effects for a few days after you get the shot. In addition to a sore arm and swelling at the injection site, side effects reported by some trial participants include tiredness, headache, muscle pain, joint pain, chills, and fever. This is normal, and it is not an indication of COVID-19, as there is no COVID-19 in the vaccine.
Over 15,000 persons in Bermuda are registered to be vaccinated. Further afield, Myanmar's new junta leader is calling on civil servants to return to work while urging people to stop mass gatherings to avoid spreading coronavirus. But demonstrators in the southeastern country are not backing down. For a sixth straight day, they gathered protesting against him and last week's military coup, and they now have a powerful ally. U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday announced that the United States will sanction Myanmar's military leaders.
I'm announcing a series of actions that we're taking to begin imposing consequences on the leaders of the coup. The U.S. government is taking steps to prevent the generals from improperly having access to the $1 billion in Burmese government funds held in the United States. And today, I've approved a new executive order, excuse me, a new executive order enabling us to immediately sanction the military leaders who directed the coup, their business interests, as well as close family members.
Mr. Biden also called on the military junta to release detained prisoners and civilian leaders and cease their crackdowns on demonstrators. To news and sports, the West Indies reached 223 for 5 at stumps on day 1 of the second test against Bangladesh in Dhaka today. After winning the toss and choosing to bat, Jamaican Nkrumah Bonner led the way for the Caribbean side with 74 not out. Bonner, who is scoring his second half century of the test series, is being supported by Joshua De Silva, who is on 22 not out. Craig Brathwaite, John Campbell, Shane Mosley, Kyle Myers and Jermaine Blackwood were the wickets to fall for 47, 36, 7, 5 and 28. Tejul Islam and Abul Jaid has taken 2 wickets each for the home side. The only change to the West Indies team is to the squad from the first test was the inclusion of Alzari Joseph, who came in for Kimar Roach. Now the West Indies leads the 2-match test series 1-0. Now earlier in the tour, Bangladesh won the ODI series 3-0. And that's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.